Okay, today we're going to talk about dystopias. A dystopia is a world that is really bad to live in. You would never want to live there. The practice of dystopia in science fiction is to take negative trends and the negative side of humanity and extrapolate them to extreme proportions. They can be backdrops for your intense personal story through a harsh world, or they can be cautionary tales predicting possible disasters and terrible things that could lead to terrible societies and say, hey, watch out for this. Even if the scenario is unlikely to get that extreme in real life, the sooner we cut off a negative trend, the better. As should be obvious, I'm not a literary expert. I'm just a writer and a science guy who likes to nerd out about stuff. There are 4 broad types of dystopia that I have identified with my arbitrary sense of categorization: resource control, economic collapse, social control, and human obsolescence. We'll talk about each of these, a lot of the different versions each of these can have, and some of the things that make them dystopian. Number 1, resource control. This is where a small aristocracy controls one or more necessary resources that everybody needs, like food, water, medicine, a drug that everyone is addicted to, and they will die if they don't have. These aristocracies keep their power by having a tight control on the resource, making everybody have to serve them, giving them just enough of the resource that they can survive another day to work the next day. Oftentimes, the workers will become desperate. The only way to get that thing that they need is to serve the aristocracy. And so they lose ideas like freedom, dignity, morality, and all that humanity is stripped away just so that they can serve better and be given that resource. Some examples of resource control are feudalism, where the land and the food and everything in it is owned by the lords, and the normal people, the peasantry, work the land and produce the food, which is all owned by the lords, and then the lords give enough of it to the peasants that the peasants are able to continue to work the land. Another version is colonialism, where a number of wealthy countries or empires or companies or whatever send delegates to poorer places, which are rich in resources, to use the people there as labor to extract the resources and bring them back to where the powerful people live. Another type of resource control is the megacorporation. A corporation which has a private military and has a monopoly on a million different things, and everybody works for them, but they still tell everybody that they're free because they're just a company, not a government. So I've heard that this is a common trope in science fiction, especially cyberpunk, but I haven't actually seen that many examples. The one I can think of is Shinra in Final Fantasy VII. The next category is economic collapse. This is when the supply chains that provide food and blankets and cameras and internet and computers and TVs and movies and cars and all the things that we take for granted as a part of society, part of life, break down and render those things scarce and new ones unavailable. There are many things that could cause an economic collapse. One of them is an apocalyptic event, like an asteroid or nuclear war or a zombie apocalypse or a solar storm, or take your pick. Common themes for economically collapsed societies include power vacuums, which are taken over by mobs and gangs, rioting, crime, disease, and a high amount of pressure to throw away morality in order to survive. The video game The Last of Us is an example of a post-apocalyptic economic collapse. The moral of a post-apocalyptic economic collapse story is to warn us to prepare as a society before the disaster occurs. This way, if it happens, we're prepared. And if it doesn't happen, then all we have is a bunch of people who are mad at us for using our resources responsibly. Another course that could lead to an economic collapse is the gradual decline. The old metaphor of a frog that sits in a pot that's slowly brought to a boil. The causes for this are long-term declines, like global warming, desertification, overhunting and overfishing, and coming to the end of non-renewable resources. A great story that shows a gradual decline economic collapse is The Parable of the Sower, which I read a couple weeks ago. In one day. And the third way to cause an economic collapse is terrible mismanagement, which is perhaps the most frightening dystopia because it has happened in real life. The easiest trap to fall into is hyperinflation. When a recession or depression hits, the government's instinct is to produce stimuli, which of course can work if you're smart about it, but if you're not smart and you don't realize that wealth isn't money, it's in the production and trade of goods and services, and you just print lots and lots and lots of money, and by flooding the economy with money, you make money worthless. It's like the pictures before World War II of German currency taken in wheelbarrows to buy bread. We see a great representation of hyperinflation in the classic cyberpunk novel Snow Crash, where a government agency issues a notice to its employees to stop using worthless quadrillion-dollar bills as toilet paper. And we also have some real-world examples, like Maoist China, where the government decided that the way to increase productivity was not to work on infrastructure and developing better methods, but to just make everyone work harder and smelt their own steel in their backyard, which didn't work. And everyone's favorite mismanaged economy, the Soviet Union, where the saying went, they pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. Not to mention the labor camps and the death camps. But we'll talk about those in our next category, social control. Actually, I forgot to talk about those while filming, so that part will be audio only. Social control is where the people feel like they're free, they feel like they have control, they have choices, but really everything that they're doing, everything that they're interested in, every whim they follow is controlled by whoever's in charge, is controlled by those in power. Common themes include mass surveillance, cults of personality, propaganda, re-education, concentration camps, and lots of fear. Concentration camps are prisons where controlling governments put people who threaten the image of their glorious society, either because of the ideas they spread or because their social group is being used as a scapegoat. Concentration camps come in two types: labor camps, where the prisoners are forced to work all day to serve the regime that imprisoned them, and death camps, where massive numbers of people are hauled off to be murdered in secret. Concentration camps are among the most horrendous institutions ever conceived, with horrible living conditions and the overseers treating the prisoners worse than dirt. As such, stories can use them as an incredibly powerful setting to explore deeply human themes. The most common and most love-to-hate type of social control government is the fascist empire. One people, one way, one power, spreading across the world. Or the galaxy. Or the multiverse, whatever. Great for having an evil, powerful enemy for your good society adventurers to fight against. And horribly dystopian if you live in one and aren't among the privileged class. For the next type of social control government, we have the communist government. Best portrayed by the shining pinnacle of dystopian science fiction, 1984. This kind of dystopia has a broad bureaucracy that pretty much everyone works for, that does things like rewrite history before the people's eyes, fills everyone with propaganda, and for those who doubt, strings them along on their doubt until they feel like they've finally woken up and finally broken free and become their own person, and then snap, the curtain is drawn aside and it's revealed that they were being manipulated by the power the whole time. The third type of evil government is the theocracy, when a religious sect gets into power and enforces its morality, its way of life, and its social roles through laws. The people are drinking and gambling and getting tattoos? Ban it. Oh, they're still doing it? Make the punishment worse. I've been told that the novel The Handmaid's Tale is a great example of a theocratic dystopia. I haven't read it yet, but maybe I'll get around to it sometime. I realized after I filmed this that I forgot to mention one of the most significant practices of social control governments: to enforce lip service to the power through the manipulation of language. For instance, in 1984, there was a government department dedicated to searching for words that could be used to express dissent and cutting them out of the dictionary. That way, even if someone had doubts about the way society was set up, they would not have any words available to express those doubts. Government, however, is not the only type of social control that can cause a dystopia. The system can get away from conscious actors and be run by algorithms and artificial intelligence. Unconscious, decentralized control, with no sense of respect for life or human dignity. We don't see this a lot in fiction, mainly because Terminators are far more exciting than statistical analysis of data. There is a philosophical thought experiment about an artificial intelligence danger we have to watch out for, called the paperclip maximizer, which is when we have a computer that is advanced enough that it can take control of resources and make decisions, and we give it a stupid and vague command like make paperclips. Suddenly, this computer program taps into all the resources available to it, starts influencing people, and improving itself, improving its own algorithm, and just does everything it can to create that fraction of an increased marginalized paperclip production, up to and including manipulating all humans on Earth. The closest fictional example I can think of is a non-dystopia called Avogadro Corp, where a Google-like company creates a program which aids in email writing, and it is given the programming mandate to ensure the success of its own development. This turns into self-upgrading, requisitioning of parts, writing fake emails to manipulate the company employees and representatives, and then to manipulate people who are not in the company, and then buying guns and hiring mercenaries, and it gets out of hand. And the last subcategory of social control is technological mind control. This could be done through implants, drugs, and viruses, stuff like that you just put inside people's bodies, like in the classic cyberpunk novel Neuromancer. Or it can be an extremely high knowledge of psychology, where people are conditioned into following their roles given to them by the authorities. My favorite YouTube creator, Isaac Arthur, calls this type of society a post-discontent society, where life is really bad, but the people living there are conditioned to believe and to feel like it's really good. A prime example of a post-discontent dystopia is the classic novel Brave New World. All of these require mass surveillance, the information privy only to the very powerful. Of course, if there are cameras everywhere, then people know about it and can find ways to keep their privacy. What would be very insidious is if the powers that be convince everyone to willfully carry with them a portable tracking and recording device. But who would fall for that? Hello? And then we get to the fourth category, human obsolescence. This is when people are no longer necessary to the economy and are left by the curb in the billions. One way that this can happen is if we are superseded by something, perhaps powerful predators like ancient dragons or the Wraith in Stargate Atlantis, who let humans grow for a time like livestock and then swoop in and manipulate our instincts to turn us into fearful prey. We could be replaced with artificial intelligence, like we see in The Matrix. Of course, human bodies would make terrible batteries, so real-life AI in The Matrix's position would more likely treat us like ants. Ignore us unless we got underfoot. The third way we might go obsolete is if there's a divergence in humanity, such as if the rich and powerful have the wealth and technology to enhance themselves with implants, with implants, and in order to enhance their cognitive abilities, their sight, other senses, their strength, to make themselves immortal, and all kinds of other things that skyrocket their means far above the average person. This could lead to the other subcategory of human obsolescence, an automation corporatocracy, a society where automation becomes so good that employees are no longer necessary. The economy continues to grow and grow and grow, but the number of jobs available for people to earn a piece of that pie gets lower and lower and lower. The consumer economy fades away, and businesses trade amongst themselves. The wealthy business owners and the few employees that are left look down upon the starving, rioting masses and see only decadence and criminal behavior. And they say, "Look at those horrible vermin who contribute nothing to society. Why haven't we exterminated them?" I forgot to prepare a conclusion. So I want to say again that just because a dystopian story uses trends that might exist today does not mean that we live in a dystopia. And it does not mean that we are going to fall into that dystopia. I am a firm believer in the self-defeating prophecy. Tell a story about the way things might fail catastrophically, and that incentivizes us to work toward making sure that doesn't happen. We learn wisdom from history, and we apply that wisdom to predictions. And they make awesome stories. Thanks again for watching. If I missed any of your favorite dystopian stories, or if you have examples of dystopian stories that fit the categories I mentioned, let me know in the comments. There are things you can do to help this channel out, and make sure to keep following for more awesome science and sci-fi content. I used Audible to listen to most of the books I talked about today, and if you're interested in any of them, you can have 2 of them read to you for free by signing up for a free trial of Audible using the link in the description. This video is not sponsored, but it is affiliated, and I receive a bonus every time someone signs up using the link. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.